It happened so fast I didn't even see the cup slip from my hand. One moment I was trying to balance 3 orders. The next, hot coffee was splashed across the chest of a man in an immaculate charcoal suit. The world froze for a heartbeat. The cafe went silent except for the soft hiss of the espresso machine. I gasped. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Before I could reach for a napkin, I felt his eyes on me. Deep, sharp, heavy. The kind of gaze that makes you forget how to breathe. He didn't look angry, not in the normal way. His calmness was far scarier. The brown liquid dripped down the fine fabric of his jacket, and he didn't even glance at it. He was looking at me. His jaw tightened slightly as he handed his glass to the man standing beside him. I noticed then that the other man wore a dark earpiece and had the kind of posture that screamed bodyguard. Then the stranger, tall, broad, handsome in a way that was more danger than beauty, spoke. His voice was low, steady, with that quiet authority that makes the air colder. "Don't let her leave." Those words, they weren't shouted, but they hit harder than any yell could. The bodyguard nodded once and moved toward me, blocking my way to the counter. My heart stumbled in my chest. I didn't mean to, sir," I stammered, gripping the edge of my apron. "It was an accident. I'll pay for the cleaning," or the man didn't respond right away. He took a white handkerchief from his pocket and wiped a spot off his wrist, his gaze never leaving my face. His eyes were storm gray, unreadable but full of something raw, something I couldn't name. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lila," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He repeated it quietly like he was testing it. "Lila." The way he said it, like it meant more than it should, sent a strange chill down my spine. The other customers pretended not to look, but I could feel their eyes darting between us. My manager peeked out from the kitchen, pale and trembling, but didn't dare step in. Everyone knew who he was by now. The name whispered around town like a warning. Adrian Moretti, the head of the Moretti crime family, the man who owned half the city, its clubs, its politicians, even its fear. And I had just spilled coffee on him. Adrian finally handed the handkerchief to his guard and stood. The cafe felt smaller, tighter as he stepped closer. His cologne hit me first, dark cedar, smoke, and something rich I couldn't place. When he spoke again, his tone had softened, but it still carried that dangerous calm. "Do you always tremble when you make mistakes, Lila?" I swallowed. "Only when someone looks at me like that." That made the corner of his mouth twitch. Just a hint of a smile. But there was no real humor in it. "You're honest," he said, almost to himself. "I like that." He took another step closer, close enough that I could see the faint scar near his jawline. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I wasn't sure if it was fear or something else entirely. "I didn't mean any harm," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but you've caught my attention," his attention. The words felt heavier than they should have. He turned to his guard again, his voice barely audible but sharp enough to slice the air. "She's coming with us," my breath caught. "What? No, I can't just leave. My shift." "Call your manager," he said without even looking at me. "Tell her you won't be finishing today." The guard's hand gently but firmly touched my elbow. "Please, miss, don't make this difficult." I looked around helplessly, but no one dared meet my eyes. The room was filled with silence and fear, and something else too, something strange curling in my stomach. Adrian looked at me one last time before walking toward the door. "Lila," he said quietly, almost like a promise, "you have nothing to be afraid of." But as the cafe door swung shut behind us, and I found myself stepping into the black car waiting outside, I knew deep down that wasn't true, because men like him didn't notice girls like me, unless fate was about to do something neither of us could undo. The car door shut behind me with a heavy thud that seemed to seal my fate. The smell of leather filled the air, clean and sharp, mixed with the faint hint of his cologne. My heart wouldn't calm down. My hands trembled so much that I had to sit on them just to stop it. Adrian sat beside me, silent, his eyes fixed on the dark window as the car began to move. The driver didn't ask questions. The bodyguard in the front seat didn't look back. It was as if everyone already knew the rules of this strange, dangerous world, except me. I swallowed hard and finally found the courage to speak. "Where are you taking me?" Adrian turned his head slightly, his eyes meeting mine. "Somewhere quiet." "That's not an answer," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. A faint smile touched his lips. "You ask too many questions for someone who just spilled coffee on me." I looked down, embarrassed, but my fear was slowly mixing with curiosity. His voice wasn't cruel. It was calm, patient, even a little teasing. But underneath it, there was steel, the kind that made you realize he could destroy a man's life with a single word. The city lights flickered outside as the car turned onto a quieter street. My stomach twisted with every turn. "You didn't have to take me," I whispered. I said I was sorry. "I know," he said softly, leaning back. "But apologies don't interest me. Truth does." I frowned, confused. "Truth about what?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a cigarette. He didn't light it, just rolled it between his fingers, thoughtful. "When you looked at me in that cafe," he said finally, "you didn't look away." I blinked, thrown off by the words. I was scared. He looked at me again. "You were, yes, but you didn't hide it. Most people do. Most people lie with their eyes." The car slowed to a stop in front of what looked like a private townhouse. Grand, old, guarded by iron gates. The driver stepped out first, followed by the bodyguard. Adrian gestured for me to get out, and I hesitated only a moment before doing as he said. The night air was cool, brushing against my skin like a warning. He led me up the stone steps, through heavy doors, into a hallway that smelled faintly of whiskey and expensive polish. The house was quiet, too quiet, filled with shadows and soft gold light. "This is my home," he said simply, taking off his jacket and handing it to a maid who appeared silently from nowhere. "Sit." I sat on the edge of a velvet chair, my eyes darting around the room. Bookshelves, old paintings, a grand piano. Everything screamed money and power, but there was something lonely about it too. He poured himself a drink and looked back at me. "Relax, you're not in trouble." "Could have fooled me," I muttered before I could stop myself. He raised an eyebrow. "You have spirit." "That's rare." "I have fear," I corrected him. He smiled faintly. "They're often the same thing." He walked closer, stopping just in front of me. I could see the faint lines near his eyes now, proof that he wasn't as young as he looked, maybe mid-30s. Still, there was something timeless about him, like he belonged to a world that didn't follow the same rules as everyone else. "I've seen many people beg, lie, and run," he said, his voice quiet now. "But you—" He paused, searching my face. "You didn't. You looked at me like I was just a man." "Because that's what you are," I said softly. "A man who got coffee spilled on him." He let out a low, genuine laugh, the kind that sounded like it hadn't escaped him in a long time. "You're bold, Lila." "I'm terrified," I whispered. "I know," he said, his tone shifting, deepening. "But don't be. You're safe here, for now." The way he said it, the pause before "for now," made my pulse quicken. He reached out and gently touched my chin, lifting it so I had to look up at him. His fingers were warm, strong, but careful, like he didn't want to scare me. His eyes held mine for a long moment. "Tell me something," he murmured. "If I let you walk out that door right now, would you run?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Would it matter if I said yes?" He smiled again, slow and knowing. "No, because you won't." He turned away before I could answer, walking toward the piano. His fingers brushed across the keys without pressing them, like he was remembering something. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "We'll talk in the morning." He walked out of the room, leaving me there, surrounded by silence and confusion, and something else I couldn't shake. Something that felt a lot like destiny. Destiny. The morning came softly. Sunlight filtered through long white curtains, brushing the edge of a room that wasn't mine. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The bed beneath me was too soft. The air smelled faintly of coffee and cologne. and the silence carried a strange weight. Then it all came back, Adrian Moretti. The cafe, the car. Don't let her leave. I sat up quickly, my heart racing. Someone had left a tray near the nightstand. Breakfast, warm croissants, fruit, a cup of steaming tea. It looked almost gentle, which made it all feel more confusing. Dangerous men weren't supposed to serve breakfast on silver trays. I got up, my legs a little shaky, and walked toward the door. It was unlocked. I opened it just enough to peek outside. A long hallway stretched out in both directions, quiet except for the ticking of a distant clock. I took a step out, hesitant, barefoot on the marble floor. "Good morning, miss." The voice made me jump. A man stood near the end of the hall, tall and suited, the same bodyguard from the night before. His tone wasn't unfriendly, but it wasn't warm either. "Mr. Moretti is expecting you downstairs," he said simply. Expecting me. I followed him down a wide staircase into what looked like a private dining room. Adrian sat at the table, reading a newspaper, a half-finished espresso beside him. He didn't look up right away when I entered. When he finally did, it felt like the room itself took a breath. "You slept?" he asked. "Not much," I admitted. He nodded slightly. "Understandable," I hesitated. "You could have let me go." "I could have," he said calmly, folding the newspaper. "But I didn't. Why?" He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Because I wanted to know why someone like you looked at me the way you did." I frowned. "I already told you. I was scared." He shook his head. "No, that's not what I saw. Fear I understand, but yours was different." He stood up slowly, walking toward the tall windows behind the table. "Do you know how many people look at me like I'm a monster?" I said nothing. He turned back to me. "All of them. Except you." I stared at him, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "You don't know me," I said quietly. "I will," he replied, just as quietly. The silence that followed felt thick enough to touch. I didn't know what game he was playing, or what he wanted from me, but there was something in his eyes. Loneliness, maybe. Or guilt. Something human. A knock at the door broke the moment. The bodyguard leaned in. "Boss, it's about the docks." Adrian's face changed instantly. The softness gone, replaced by a cold, controlled focus. "Handle it," he said. "Tell Marco I'll speak with him later." The guard nodded and left. Adrian's gaze shifted back to me, and for a second I saw the truth behind his calm mask. The weight he carried, the life that chained him. "You shouldn't be here," I said finally. "Men like you, your world isn't safe." He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And yet here you are." I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic about the way he said it, something that pulled me closer instead of pushing me away. "Lila," he said suddenly, his voice softer now. "Do you have anyone waiting for you? Family? A boyfriend?" I hesitated. "No, just bills." He looked down for a second, almost like that answer made him sad. "Then you have nothing to lose being honest with me." "I don't lie," I said. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between us. "Good. Then don't start." We stood there for what felt like forever, the world outside fading away. I could hear his quiet breathing, the ticking clock, the hum of my own pulse. His hand brushed against mine for just a second. A fleeting, electric touch. And I knew then that whatever this was, it wasn't going to end simply. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, I already knew something I didn't want to admit. I was beginning to trust him. And that might have been the most dangerous thing of all. I spent the next few days inside Adrian's house, though house wasn't the right word for it. It was more like a fortress built to look beautiful. Tall stone walls, guards who never spoke, cameras that blinked red in the corners. Every door seemed to open only when someone allowed it to. And yet no one treated me like a prisoner. I could walk around, eat, even sit in the garden when I wanted to. Still, every time I looked up, I felt eyes on me. Always watching, always guarding. Adrian wasn't home most of the time. His world was somewhere out there, in the alleys, at the docks, in quiet rooms where deals were made and people disappeared. But every evening, without fail, he returned, and every evening, he'd find me. Sometimes it was in the kitchen while I tried to make myself tea, and he'd take the cup from my hand just to make one for me instead. Sometimes it was on the balcony, where he'd stand beside me in silence, his gaze on the city lights. He rarely talked about himself, but I listened, to the silence, to the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. He wasn't gentle, not really, but he was careful, like he didn't want to break something fragile. One night, the rain fell hard against the windows, and I found him sitting by the fire, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. I hesitated in the doorway before stepping in. "You don't sleep much, do you?" I asked quietly. He looked up, half smiling. "Sleep isn't kind to men like me." "Why not?" "Because when it's quiet," he said, turning his glass in his hand, "the past gets louder." I walked closer, sitting across from him. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. He looked tired, older than before. "Tell me something, Lila," he said softly. "Do you believe people can change?" "I think they can try," I said. "But change doesn't erase what they've done." He nodded slowly, like that hurt more than he expected. "You sound like you've lived through something." I smiled faintly. "Everyone has." He leaned back, watching me. "You're not afraid of me anymore." "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted. "You confuse me." "Good," he said. "You confuse me too." The fire cracked softly between us, the only sound in the room. There was something in his eyes that night, something raw, almost broken. "You shouldn't have been there that day," he said suddenly, "at that cafe. My men were supposed to keep that place quiet. I was meeting someone dangerous?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "Someone who won't stop until they hurt me. And people close to me, then why bring me here?" I whispered. He looked at me for a long time. "Because after you spilled that coffee, I saw something I haven't seen in a long time. Innocence. And I needed to remember it existed." I didn't know what to say. My throat felt tight. He put his drink down and stood, walking toward me. His shadow stretched across the floor as he stopped just inches away. "You don't belong in my world, Lila, but I can't seem to let you go." My heart skipped. "Then maybe you should try." He smiled, but it was sad. If only it were that simple. He reached out, brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. His touch lingered for a moment too long. I could smell the faint scent of smoke and rain on his shirt. Then his phone buzzed. The sound broke the moment. He stepped away, answering it in Italian, his tone sharp and controlled. I couldn't understand much, but I recognized one word repeated several times. Tradimento. Betrayal. When he hung up, his face had changed completely. The softness was gone. "I have to go," he said. "What happened?" "Nothing you should worry about," he said quickly. "Stay inside tonight, no matter what you hear." And before I could say another word, he was gone. I stood there, the echo of his footsteps fading, the fire still burning. My chest felt heavy, tight with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or something worse. Care. Because for the first time, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just feel safe when Adrian was near. I felt alive. And that scared me more than anything else in his dangerous, beautiful world. Dangerous, beautiful world. That night felt longer than any I'd lived through before. The house was too quiet. Quiet in a way that made every little sound feel like a warning. Rain tapped against the windows, the clock ticked somewhere down the hall, and my thoughts wouldn't stop running back to him. I didn't even know where he'd gone. But the word he'd said on the phone, betrayal, kept echoing in my head. The air felt thick with something unspoken, like the whole house was holding its breath. Hours passed. I sat by the fire until it burned down to soft orange embers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, calm but shadowed, strong but tired. The way he looked at me before he left, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Then, sometime past midnight, the door slammed. Voices followed. Low, sharp, angry. I jumped up, my heart racing, and moved to the edge of the hallway. Adrian's voice cut through the tension, rougher than I'd ever heard it. "Who gave them the location?" he barked. I froze. Another man's voice answered. One of his lieutenants, I guessed. We don't know yet, boss, but it wasn't an accident. They knew where the shipment was. Someone on the inside. Enough, Adrian snapped. Find out who. There was silence, then footsteps. Someone stormed past me without even noticing I was there. Adrian appeared seconds later, his shirt half open, blood on his sleeve. Not his, I hoped. He stopped when he saw me standing there. For a moment, the cold edge in his expression cracked. What are you doing up? He asked softly. I couldn't sleep, I said. You're bleeding. It's not mine. He walked past me into the study, grabbed a towel from a cabinet and wiped his hands. The air smelled like gunpowder and rain. Adrian, I whispered. What happened? He looked up at me slowly. Someone tried to take something that belongs to me. I hesitated. And you stopped them? He nodded, his jaw tightening. For now. He tossed the towel aside and sat down, running a hand through his hair. I could see the exhaustion in him now, how it clung to his shoulders like a shadow. You're not supposed to see this, he said. Any of it. I didn't ask to, I whispered. I know. He looked at me again and his voice softened. But now you're here, and that means I have to protect you, whether you like it or not. From what? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for a drawer and pulled out a small black box. Inside it was a gun. He checked it, calm and practiced, then set it on the table like it was nothing more than a pen. My stomach turned. You really live like this? Every day, and you just accept it? He exhaled slowly. There's no leaving once you're inside. Not without burying someone first. I looked at him for a long time, trying to find something human behind all that control. Then why me, Adrian? Why bring me into this? He stood, walking closer, his expression unreadable. Because I wanted to see if something good could still exist around me. His words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint bruise forming on his cheek. His hand came up, brushing against my jaw, warm and careful. You don't understand, Lila, he murmured. When you looked at me that day, it felt like you saw past the monster. And I can't forget that. The air between us was heavy. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Adrian. I started, but the rest of my words vanished when he leaned in just slightly, his breath brushing against my skin. He didn't kiss me. Not yet. But the space between us throbbed with the promise of something dangerous and real. Then, all at once, the sound of an explosion thundered from outside. The windows rattled, the lights flickered, and his guards shouted in the distance. Adrian grabbed my wrist instantly, pulling me down as glass shattered somewhere down the hall. Stay behind me, he ordered, his voice low, steady, deadly calm. Smoke began to creep in through the cracks of the door. I could hear engines outside, gunfire in the distance. The world had just turned upside down in seconds. Adrian's hand tightened on mine as he led me toward the back of the house. They found us, he muttered. We're leaving. Now. And just like that, I was no longer just the waitress who spilled coffee on a dangerous man. I was part of his war. Part of his war. The whole house shook when the second blast hit. Adrian pulled me through a narrow corridor that led to the back entrance, his hand firm around mine. I could barely keep up. My heartbeat filled my ears, faster than the footsteps thudding around us. The smell of smoke and dust stung my throat. Somewhere behind us, a guard shouted. Then the sound was swallowed by another crash. Adrian stopped at a side door and pressed a code into a small black panel. A lock clicked and cold air rushed in. Outside, the night was wild. Rain mixed with ash, car lights cutting through the darkness. Get in, he ordered, opening the rear door of a black SUV. I climbed in without thinking. He slid into the seat beside me, slammed the door, and the car shot forward. The driver didn't say a word. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain hitting the roof. Then Adrian spoke, voice low and controlled. They knew the layout, he said. That means someone close gave it up. I glanced at him. His face was calm, too calm. but his eyes burned like the city lights outside. Sharp, cold, and tired. "Are you hurt?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, but they will be." Something about the way he said it scared me. I turned to the window instead, watching the rain blur the world into streaks of light. "Adrian," I said softly, "you don't have to fight everyone. You could just walk away." He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "There's no walking away. Not when people are watching to see if you'll fall." "Then what happens now?" He sighed, leaning back. "Now, we disappear for a while." The driver turned sharply onto a narrow road that cut through the hills. Trees rose on both sides, black shapes in the night. The city was gone behind us, swallowed by distance and smoke. After a while, Adrian's hand found mine again. He didn't say anything, and he didn't look at me. He just held it. Firm. Warm. Like it grounded him somehow. When we finally stopped, it was in front of a small cabin, half hidden behind the trees. No guards, no cameras. Just silence and the smell of wet earth. He got out first, checked the surroundings, then motioned for me to follow. "Where are we?" I whispered. "A place they don't know," he said. "For now." Inside, the cabin was simple. One room, a table, an old couch, and a bed tucked against the far wall. He dropped his jacket on a chair, then went straight to the window, scanning the darkness outside. "Adrian," I said quietly, stepping closer. "You can breathe now. We're safe." He didn't move at first. Then slowly he turned toward me. His expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured. "Every time I think about what could have happened tonight." He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. For once, he didn't look like the man who owned fear. He looked human. Without thinking, I stepped closer. "You protected me," I said. "You always do." He met my eyes, and for a moment the tension cracked open, raw and unguarded. "Not because I have to," he said quietly. "Because I want to." The words hung in the air between us. The rain outside softened, turning to a steady whisper against the windows. He reached out, his hand brushing mine again, this time slower, gentler. "I've done terrible things, Lila," he said. "But when I look at you, I start to wonder if there's still something left in me that isn't broken." I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, my fingers tightening around his. "Maybe that's what this is," I said softly. Two broken people trying to remember what whole felt like. He looked at me for a long moment before nodding slightly, like he accepted something inside himself. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. But for the first time since I met him, Adrian Moretti looked at peace, at least for now. Now. The storm faded by morning, but the air still smelled like rain and smoke. I woke up to the sound of Adrian pacing. The cabin was small enough that I could hear every step. He was on the phone again, his tone low, words clipped. I couldn't make out everything, just fragments, shipment, loyalty, watch the families. The kind of words that built walls around a man. When he hung up, he stood still for a moment, his hand pressed against the edge of the window frame. The light hit him softly, catching the silver in his hair, the weariness around his eyes. He looked less like a boss and more like someone who had been carrying the world too long. "You're awake," he said when he noticed me. I nodded. "Did you get any sleep?" He smiled faintly. "A few minutes. It's enough." I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. "You always say that like it's true." He turned toward me, leaning against the table. "It has to be true. My life depends on pretending I'm fine." That quiet honesty disarmed me. He wasn't the cold, untouchable man the city feared. He was a man standing in the space between duty and exhaustion. "Adrian," I said softly, "what are you going to do now?" He shrugged. "Find the one who betrayed me. Make things right." The words were simple, but the pain behind them wasn't. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the night before. "And when you find them, what does making things right mean?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the battle in his eyes, the one between the man he had to be and the man he wanted to be. It means I'll decide if I can still forgive, he said finally. That wasn't the answer I expected. I nodded slowly, unsure if I believed him. For a while, we sat in silence. The fire crackled softly, and the forest outside began to wake. Birds calling, branches dripping with leftover rain. Do you ever wish you'd chosen something else? I asked. Every day, he said. But choices become cages, Lila. Once you walk into one, even the door behind you vanishes. He walked closer, his expression softer now. But you're not in a cage yet. That's why I keep looking at you. You remind me what freedom looks like. His hand brushed mine again, tentative, searching. It wasn't a gesture of ownership. It felt more like confession. Adrian, I whispered. He smiled, a real one this time. You don't have to say anything. I just need to know you're not afraid of me anymore. I'm not, I said honestly, but I'm afraid for you. Something in his face changed at that. A small flicker of warmth, mixed with disbelief. That might be the kindest thing anyone said to me in years. We stayed like that. Two people sitting in a cabin the world had forgotten, listening to the forest breathe. When the quiet stretched too long, I broke it. You said they knew the layout of your house. Someone close to you gave it up. Do you know who? He looked down, his jaw tightening. I have a guess, but I need proof before I act. I waited, but he didn't say the name. Whatever it was, it hurt too much to speak. Finally, he turned toward the door, grabbing his jacket. I have to go back into the city. I'll come back for you tonight. I stood up quickly. No, Adrian, please, you can't go alone, he smiled gently. You still think I ever do anything alone? Then, seeing the fear in my face, he stepped close and touched my cheek. I'll be fine. His thumb brushed a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Don't cry for me, Lila. It's not my time yet. And before I could argue, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, leaving the faint echo of his cologne in the air. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, the sound of the rain starting again outside. Something deep in my chest told me that the man who just walked away was walking straight into the kind of danger that no one could come back from unchanged. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I stopped being afraid of him and started being afraid of losing him. The hours after Adrian left moved slower than time itself. Every sound outside made me flinch. The wind through the trees, the faint hum of engines far away, the steady drip of rain from the roof. He'd said he would come back by nightfall. But the sky turned dark, and he didn't. By the second night, I couldn't stand the waiting anymore. The silence felt like it was pressing against my chest. My mind kept running through the same questions. Was he alive? Did he find who betrayed him? Or was he caught in something he couldn't fight his way out of this time? I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping the locket I always wore, a cheap little thing with a photo of my mother inside. I hadn't prayed in years, but that night I did. I didn't even ask for miracles. I just asked that he'd come back. Sometime past midnight, I heard it. A car engine, soft, steady, familiar. I ran to the door before I even thought. When I opened it, the headlights washed over me, and there he was. Standing in the rain, tired, soaked through, his shirt half unbuttoned and streaked with something dark that wasn't all rainwater. Adrian, I cried, stepping toward him. He looked at me, and for a moment, I didn't see the Mafia boss. I saw a man who had been to hell and barely found his way back. I told you not to wait up, he said hoarsely, but his voice cracked halfway through. I ignored him, grabbing his arm. You're hurt. It's nothing, he muttered, but when I touched his sleeve, he flinched. I led him inside before he could argue. He sat down heavily on the chair near the fire, rain still dripping from his hair. I fetched a towel, trembling as I tried to clean the dried blood on his arm. He watched me in silence. The firelight made the shadows move across his face, catching on the lines of exhaustion and something deeper. Grief. You found them, didn't you? I whispered. He didn't answer right away. I found more than I wanted to. I looked up, meeting his eyes. Who was it? My cousin, he said quietly. The one I grew up with. The one who swore he'd die before betraying me. My hand froze. I'm so sorry. He let out a bitter laugh. Sorry doesn't fix a hole like that, Lila. It just reminds you it's there. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I wrapped the towel around his arm, gentle, trying to stop the bleeding. His skin was cold, his breath shallow. "You should have stayed away from me," he said suddenly. "You deserve a life that isn't built on fear." "Then stop pushing me toward it," I said. "You keep saying I shouldn't be here, but you brought me here. You kept me here. You looked at me like I was the only thing that still made sense." He stared at me, his jaw tight, but he didn't speak. "You don't get to decide what I can handle," I said, my voice shaking. "You've spent your whole life surrounded by people who fear you." "But I don't. I want you to stop fighting everyone, Adrian. For once, fight for something." He looked at me for a long time, his gray eyes stormy and wet. Then slowly he reached out and pulled me close. My forehead pressed against his chest, his heartbeat steady under my cheek. "Lila," he murmured, his voice rough with something he'd spent years hiding. "I don't know how to be anything but what I am." "Then be human," I whispered. "With me." He exhaled, shaky and deep, his hand sliding up to the back of my neck. For the first time, he didn't look like the man who controlled a city. He looked like someone finally letting go. The world outside was still chaos. The rain, the danger, the debts he couldn't escape. But for that brief moment, none of it existed. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer. "If I asked you to leave with me, would you?" I looked up at him. "Where would we go?" "Anywhere they can't find us." I smiled sadly. "You know there's no such place." He smiled back, tired but real. "Then maybe it's time I stop letting the world decide who I get to keep." The fire crackled quietly between us. His fingers brushed against mine, slow and warm, and the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. For the first time since that day in the cafe, I wasn't afraid. I knew the road ahead would be dangerous, messy, maybe even short. But I also knew this. Whatever was waiting out there, we would face it together. And sometimes that's all love really is. Two people standing against a world that keeps trying to break them, refusing to let go. Let go.